In today's podcast, I am joined by professional tipster, Daryl Carter. Daryl, great to have you on. How are you?
Yeah, great to be on. Thank you very much for thinking of me, Pete. Yeah, excited. Looking forward to doing this. Got some good issues to get stuck into, I think.
Yeah, I think so. We've got a lot of questions to work through. So for those people not familiar with you and what you do, first of all, do you want to give an intro to your current role in the industry and your work as a professional tipster?
Yeah, sure. So essentially, I'm a professional tipster. I work for gg.co.uk, providing a daily tipping column each day. I also work for Betfair, providing a daily news column as well as covering the likes of Tony Calvin and doing bits and pieces like the Racing League, for example, what I cover for them. And I'm also a hospitality tipster. So I work at a lot of racecourses around the country, mainly Wincanton and Exeter, where I'm a resident, which means I do every single meeting. But I also do casual work at the likes of Newbury and Sandown and other venues. But very, very busy in the winter, slightly calmer in the summer.
So when you say professional tipster, that's really true. You don't just write about it for Betfair and GG. Most people are probably most familiar with you in terms of the work that you do, but obviously this work on course, it's non-stop for you, and that's just your full-time gig, isn't it, as a paid tipster?
Yeah, I'm not sloping off to another job or anything. There's definitely not time for that. But I love working on course. It's fantastic getting into the boxes, speaking to people, having one-on-one contact, taking them into the parade ring. You know, you get a lot of little wedges there that you wouldn't normally get. I mean, overhearing things in a parade ring before a race from a trainer or a jockey, or just getting that sense of feeling of a horse hitting the line when you're actually at the track. So big upside to doing the hospitality work, and I really enjoy it. I don't take it too seriously. People who's been in my boxes will know that. We have a good laugh, and it's about having fun, essentially. And if I can win them some money on the day, terrific.
Yeah, it's a day out, isn't it? But obviously, yeah, you could say you can win a bit of cash. That's good. It's interesting to hear that you can still get a sense of perhaps where, something that you might overlook. Obviously, you won't be able to see online, but at the actual course, you're actually able to see, the actual horses themselves and pick out things that maybe you haven't noticed. Is that something that you use yourself in terms of your own betting as well, when you're on course?
Absolutely, especially the place like Wincanton. Wincanton is used by Paul Nicholls, for example, as basically like a nursery ground for his young horses, and they'll come there, they'll need the experience, and you'll see firsthand that they're finishing very strongly, and for next time maybe they're going to know a little bit more, or you'll see them jump terribly, but you'll still see them have that engine to hit the line and finish strongly. So you can definitely get a different feel when you're at a race course as opposed to watching it on videos and watching those videos back, etc., or watching it on TV. So definitely big upsides to being on course, especially in the parade ring, etc. So I would not give it up, not for love nor money.
No, plus that's fascinating. Plus you can obviously get a bet on. We'll talk about that later on, bookmakers and getting bets on. I know a lot of people are looking at on course these days as a route to get on. But I also want to talk about what you do now, because you weren't always professional tipster. You actually had quite a different career in your earlier life. You worked as a scaffolder. If people haven't watched your video with Simon Knott, I would recommend to do that because you talk about this in depth. But just give me, the listeners, a brief guide to your early life, and then we'll talk what it is that made you turn to betting.
Yeah, well, I went to college first. I went to college and just did a sports degree at college. And I don't know, I just didn't really want to follow that route, really. So I just needed to get a job. I was basically a little bit of a tearaway. I said this to you before, I said it to Simon. I was basically getting in trouble every single week and scrapping and fighting every single weekend at the pub. And that led to essentially me being stabbed on a night out and in hospital, rushed in for emergency surgery. I just started scaffolding just before that to try and turn things around to make sure that I've got a job to focus on, etc. But I tell you, that will make you stop going out and being a little nuisance on the weekends if you're going to get stabbed. Not many people will probably tell you this once they've been stabbed, but I do feel like I was quite lucky that I got stabbed, really, because it turned everything around. It made me realise that I wasn't going to be capable in my later life with half of the bicep missing, still scaffolding. But I continued it for the next 12 years, got all my qualifications, run jobs. I enjoyed it for a good while. I just knew that I couldn't continue on into later life, into my 50s doing this. And eventually, I'm going to be too old and decrepit with all the scaffolding to be able to continue doing it. So I had to find another outlet, and I was enjoying betting at the time and looking into horse racing on the side every single evening. I never for 1 minute really thought it was going to turn into my full-time job. But I think I know this is a bit sentimental, a bit early in the podcast, but I do think a lot of people tend to sort of like want to tiptoe through life quietly to death, really, and not want to go and pursue their passions and to pursue their dreams. And it got to the point where I was ready to move on from scaffolding. I didn't care about giving up the money. I just wanted to move on it and really be happy in a day-to-day life, wake up every day excited for what I'm doing. And I wasn't getting that scaffolding.
No, but obviously, clearly you get it now from your betting. You're passionate about betting. So what is it that, from what I understand, we talked about Simon's interview, you used to go into bookmaker shops. That was a regular haunt for you. How did that then translate from, like I say, doing all that work in the evening, trying to find your own edge? Was there anyone that inspired you in terms of betting, or was it just an innate interest you always had?
It was an interest I'd always had. I mean, I didn't mention this on Simon's interview, and I kind of wish I did afterwards. But there were people that inspired me in terms of to try and look a bit deeper into racing and try and work out for myself what the hell is going on with these horses continuously reversing form, etc. Just look at the sprint division. It's a game of whose turns next. So I looked to people like Paul Keeley, who I thought did tremendous write-ups in the Racing Post. There was a guy called Andy Gibson who works for At the Race. He's a pro punter himself. He gave me a couple of phone calls at the beginning to try and tell me, you need to pick what path you want to go down, you want to do this, that. So he was quite influential. But in terms of who convinced me to go down this path, no one really, other than just my genuine interest in all these facts, figures, numbers, statistics on horse racing.
I see. And then was there a moment when you were able to start to make a profit from that, and then obviously that led to the tipping?
Exactly that. So I was sort of making a profit on the side. And I think in any walk of life, if you want to do a side hustle or a side business or get out of your day job, I do think that the best way to do it is to do that on the side and really put the effort into your passion on the side. Mm-hmm. And there'll be a time when it tells you when you're ready to leave your day job. And that's what it got to for me. I was starting to win money. I was starting basically to earn my day's wage by about 2 or 3 o'clock in the winter. I've had a winner at Tipster at the 2:05 or whatever, or I'd come back from a lunch break and I'd had a winner, and then they were asking me to stay on late and stuff. And you really do lose your enthusiasm for the job when you haven't got any in the beginning, when you're making money on the side. Now, I wasn't making tremendous amounts of money, but I was making enough to really start turning my head towards the betting side of horse racing. But I needed to find something that I could say to my missus, look, this is going to be a bit of an income, and then I'm going to try this on the side as well, just to try and make her feel a bit better. And then I got the gig at Katana Media, or Racing Tips it was at the time, before I moved to GG, just simply by tipping them a horse on Twitter one day. And it was just sheer luck that a guy called Chris Graham and a guy called Ross Clark gave me an opportunity.
I see. So you didn't have the idea, or you weren't keen to work on just living off your own betting. You wanted to have something more solid, perhaps, to provide a reliable income every month, because obviously betting can be so up and down.
It was more for her than it was for me, Pete, to be honest. I would have been more than happy to go gun-ho into the betting. But looking back now, I think I've made the right decision. Mm-hmm. I mean, we'll talk about this a bit later, but obviously being solely reliant on betting is something we'll do in the future. But at the moment, I enjoy the tipping side so much. And I didn't really know I was going to go down the tipping route. This is what Andy Gibson was telling me on the phone. You need to choose the path. You need to put all your focus into that one path, know what you want. I didn't really know what I wanted until I started doing it. And I think that's the thing with a lot of people. This job, you can say, right, I'm a professional tipster. But there's so many different sides to being a tipster that it evolves constantly all the time. I mean, there's pundits on Ladbrokes or Coral TV or wherever you want to go on racing TV, for example. Then there's the guys that can write the content every day. There's so many different types. As a hospitality tipster, there's so many different types of doing it, and it's always constantly evolving. So at the beginning, I probably never knew really what I wanted to do, Pete. But It's sort of working itself out, if you like.
Yeah, that makes sense. And obviously, you've got to work with the people in your life to make sure they're happy with your choices. If you've got a partner, it's obviously a consideration for them, and in terms of what you do. So that's really interesting. I've had the pleasure of chatting to Andy Gibson as well. And so, in terms of your betting, so you continue to do that now, and that is your goal eventually, to be able to make really increasing stakes and to continue to build up on that side of things, as well as doing the tipping, because one feeds the other, doesn't it? If you're doing the research, putting out tipping columns, well, you're going to bet that as well, presumably.
Yeah, absolutely. I back everything I tip, and that is the goal. The goal is to make sure that no matter what, I can be self-reliant. So, for example, before I started driving, I was relying on other people to pick me up all the time. That was going to affect my income.
Mm-hmm.
Now, while I work for fantastic organisations in Katana Media, GG and Betfair, who I've always dreamt of working for Betfair, like from the beginning when I started getting into this, that was the company I wanted to work for. But just in case anything ever goes wrong, I need to make sure that I can be self-reliant. So if that all goes away, and God forbid it ever happens that no one ever wants to employ me, then I'm going to know that I can rely on my own betting to get by.
Yeah, of course. Well, it makes sense. Some people might be listening to this and questioning, are you just a tipster that doesn't bet? Which they might question why you put out tips and why you write it, why you don't just bet your own selections. Obviously, you do. But let's talk about the work that you do, your tipping columns, and the route that you've taken. And it's interesting because there are not that many jobs in the industry, well, paid jobs especially, where you get paid for providing betting content, betting tips. There's probably like a handful of people that do that, maybe that work in some of the Racing Post or work online. What is it that made you take that route rather than, I don't know, setting your own tipping service, for example? What is it that made you take this particular route that you have done?
To be honest with you, I don't really know. It was at the time. It was just to get an opportunity to get into racing, and it's continued on from there. Luckily enough, I'm in a position now where I am a well-paid tipster, and I am able to sort of pick and choose my jobs. I kind of said to myself at the beginning that, well, I'm not against people that are running services. Everybody's got to get paid. I kind of didn't want to start off my career by taking money out of people's pockets. I kind of wanted them to get to know me, and by doing that, they could do it for free. So later down the line, if all goes wrong for me, then that is an option to start that sort of service. But by that time, people would have known me for years and years and years. They would have built up a relationship with me, or they would have seen my past records. I mean, there's a lot of people out there that are scammers that do it. So it's hard to build a relationship with followers or with people. And thankfully, I've got good followers that have been following me a long, long time and would probably stick with me through thick and thin. So, yeah, that was kind of the reason it was more about me expanding me as a brand and sort of building a trust with my followers.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So I was just curious and to ask that question to figure out why, because there aren't too many, and it's great that you've been able to forge this particular niche for you, and it's credit to you that you've done that. And you said you work for Betfair, you work for gg.co.uk. How does it work in terms of what you put forward for them? Is it a daily column for both of them? If so, what type of bets? What time do the bets go up? How does it all work?
Okay, so we'll start with GG. GG is a daily tipping column. Now, the column will go out between about 5:30 and 7 p.m. the day before racing. Now, I know a lot of people have got a lot of stigma about that, going out the day before. But what people need to remember is that as a tipster, your job is to drive traffic to that website. Okay, yeah. So it's essentially to optimize the time of your column. Now, for me and my followers, it's always been the evening before, when people are sat at home after they back from work and they're looking at the next day's racing. That is the time, especially for GG, who have decided or do decide a lot of the time that they want it in the evening. They're very flexible in terms of if you can't get it into the evening, we can put it out in the morning. For instance, Sundays and Mondays daily column will go out in the morning. I'm normally hungover on a Sunday, in all honesty, and Monday the racing is so bland that I need help from the markets on a Monday morning more than I would so at any other time. That's just the way I've sort of always worked. In terms of Betfair, the Betfair is a daily news column that will go out. I will do that between 5 a.m. in the morning to 9 a.m. in the morning. That will go out every single day at 10 a.m. That's the daily news column providing basically all your stats, a race of the day, a stat of the day, a final word. So me having a moan on an issue, basically, market movers from the Betfair site. So we try to push that every day. That was both mine and my editor's idea. We've come up with that 18 months ago, and we've sort of moulded that column into what we feel that followers and users want. And I think we've got it to a great place. It's doing great traction. But again, it's all about how well that column is performing. If that column drops off and doesn't perform well and people lose interest in it, then there's no space for that column. So I understand there's a lot of stigma about working with bookmakers or for bookmakers, in the sense that people are saying, I want you to lose. Well, that's absolutely nonsense. I can tell you that now, because if I can't attract you to read my column, then I've not got a job. So the only way to attract people is through winning tips.
Yeah, let's talk about your record, because I think for this year, you sent me, I've seen the gd.co.uk record. You said it's not great, but you've still made just under a 10% ROI at advised prices, about 3% at Betfair SP. Now, you're describing that as not great. What would you expect to be hitting in terms of return on investment? Because I imagine the GD might be a bit higher because you're tipping earlier into perhaps markets where the money hasn't quite come for some of those horses.
There's only been 6 Betfair entries in there to go in there, because I only record on Betfair when I advise stakes. Everything else is just a pointer in the right direction, really. But in terms of the GT column, last year was 197 points with just over a 12% return on investment. I want to build on that every single year. So this year I'm trying to look at between 15 and 17. If we can get there, great, but it definitely needs to be an improvement on last year. Essentially, really, I'm still a baby in this game in terms of daily tipping. So I need to be learning every single year, and I need to be building and pushing forward every single year. So if I can produce a column every single year around 16% return on investment, I'd be more than happy, really. But the ultimate goal is to try and build on every single year.
Yeah, that makes sense. And do you find it difficult, obviously, doing daily columns? Do you find days whereby there isn't value, but you feel you have to put something up?
Yeah, in all honesty, yeah. Some days it's very difficult. Mondays, probably in particular. Sometimes on a Sunday that you're not looking at too much because everything's happened on the Saturday. Yes, but on days like that, I'm not going to go and put up 3-4 tips, because I am thinking about the profit and loss. I am thinking about the loss of the followers or the punters. On those days, I might end up putting something up shorter than I would like. For example, a solid favourite, will put up at even money for a 1-point win or something, or maybe for a 1.5 point win if I think it's got a great chance, dependent. But it would probably normally be the price that would suffer, as opposed to I don't think it's got a chance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. And I think as well, that pressure, that must be quite something to deal with as well, in terms of the expectations about putting up not just putting up every day, but you're going to have regular losing runs, you're going to have regular downturns, just as the mathematics about any particular tipster if you're trying to find value bets. And I'm curious about how that works from your perspective as a free tipster, someone who's putting everything out there for everyone to read on a daily basis. And there must be a fair amount of pressure and sometimes difficult tweets or difficult people that come to you when it comes to your performance and that kind of thing. How do you deal with that side of things?
I'm not the best at dealing with it, in all honesty. I really struggled in June this year. We lost 35 points in the month, my worst ever month, and it just felt like nothing was going right for me. Now that sounds like an absolute sob story, but that's the mentality of it. It does get in your head, and it can make you feel like you're doing worse than you are. For example, I thought that I was having so many horses beaten at short prices in running, but the beauty of keeping a profit and loss sheet, an in-depth profit and loss sheet, you've seen it. You've seen how deep it can go. You can actually extract the in-running prices and look at them in terms of percentages to see how you're actually doing. Because, for example, one would be a 14-1 shot that's been beaten at 1-4 in running, or let's say even money in running, for example. But that horse is not a 14-1 shot at the time, is it? It's an even money shot. And we were winning those types of bets 58% of the time when he should be winning them 50% of the time. So things are actually going better than you thought. It the variance was just kicking in.
Yeah.
But in terms of dealing with it, it's very, very difficult. And the last thing, honestly, I need, I'm probably staking more than the people following me in terms of total layout. But the last thing I need is people giving me aggro. I don't go down to their factory, stand over their shoulder and tell them they're doing a crap job. You know, I know when things are not going round that I need to improve it. But a lot of the times it is just variance. And I think that variance is misunderstood by a lot of people. I mean, I've seen so many like TikToks and stuff recently where people are slagging off certain services, paid services, because they've been on there for 2 weeks and they've not won. And it's like, It's so mad. But I'm trying to deal with it better. I am. But it does get to me. I'm not as thick-skinned as I thought I was.
Yeah, it's got to be hard though, because like I say, you're putting everything out there for people to judge you upon. And it seems like you put a hell of a lot of work into each day's tip, and there's a lot of thought that goes into it. But ultimately, if you say, this horse is priced at 4-1, I make it a 3-1 chance. Well, that's no guarantee it wins. It's just you're taking a value price. Do you think there's a segment of the audience that doesn't understand that concept? Or do you think that it's just the era we're living in, that people are expecting quick results and that instant gratification almost?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of both. I think you hit the nail on the head there. I do think, I don't want to sound like arrogant, like I know everything, but I mean, I don't know everything, but I do think a lot of people don't understand the way it works. So, for example, this is actually just off the top, this is an example last week. So I tip up 5,000 to 1 at 10 to 1 anti-post in my Betfair column. Right, so he's declared, and his new price is now a 3-1 shot. I said in the Betfair column, don't go back in. I mean, I wasn't advising stakes because this was just cover for Tony, but I said don't go back in. And on my GG column, where I am advising stakes, I tip documenting at 14 to 1. Documenting goes off at 7 to 2, and 5,000 to 1 drifts out to 4 to 1. So all of a sudden, we're on a 14 to 1 shot and a 10 to 1 shot. And all people wanted to do was give me grief that 5,000 to 1 didn't win because I put him up anti-post. I think people sometimes need to just relax and read everything that's written. I try and give people a good read, Pete. Like, if nothing else, I give them a good read, good reasoning why this horse. So if nothing else, I might just teach someone something, and at least they're getting something out of every selection. But I think it's a bit of both. I think it's the world we're living in now is a bit mad, isn't it?
It is, and certainly my experience is that it's sometimes difficult to try and explain the reason that you need to be patient and how sequences and mathematics work. But once you can understand that from a punter's perspective, it makes life so much easier when it comes to dealing with losing, because you're going to lose more than you're going to win, especially unless you're backing odds on. So I need to go check out TikTok, clearly, because it sounds like there's some content on there I'm missing out on.
No, I don't think it's any of your services, I don't think, mate.
All right. So you said then just a little while back, you said you get up at 8, so you're filing something at 5 a.m. Talk me through an average day then, because you're doing evening columns, you're doing early morning work, you're doing all the analysis, you're fitting in person race days. What's an average day or an average week like for you? Like, how many hours are you putting in every week?
It's mental. it's madness, but when you love what you do, that time does fly. So I'm sort of up at 5 a.m, walk into my office in my house.
How's your commute?
Yeah, that's my commute from the toilet to the office. People don't want to hear that. Into the office. I'll start the Betfair column for the day ahead. Get that sort of between 5 and 9. From between 9 and about 12, I'll be looking at yesterday's results. I'll also have the TV on in the office, which is basically on a loop on racing TV in the mornings, showing the day before's racing. Then we'll start looking at the next day ahead. I'll file the GG column, depending when price come out. It's normally about 5:30, between 5:30 and 6, around that sort of time, unless it's a big meet and the markets have been up for the last 24 hours, or they're more mature than the week's markets. And then in the evening, it'll be picking up anything else. So anything like, if I've got a hospitality day coming up, I'll be looking at all the early entries, going through every single runner, trying to make little notes on every single runner, so that when I go to the course, someone can ask me a question about any horse and I will have something to say about that horse. But it's constant. I mean, obviously it differs. So at the moment I'm covering Tony Calvin through August, so it's a bit busier. So I'm doing his anti-post column on a Monday, his Saturday column, and I'm covering York this week in a tipping column, as well as doing the daily news during the week, as well as the GG column. So it's really busy this week. That's why I kind of don't take too much hospitality work on in the summer and leave that sort of to the winter.
I see. And what is it you are looking for when you're evaluating a race card or trying to find horses? Are you specializing in any particular area? Are you using sectional times? Are you using some element, or is it a mixture of different things that, help form the mixing pot, and then you pick out some of the value bets from there?
It's a little bit of a mix. I need something to draw me into a race. I will look at every single race on the day, but I will just look at it. And if nothing draws me into it, then I won't get involved. But essentially, I'm always looking for something that might have caught my eye before, something that was unfavoured by the draw, unfavoured by track position, unfavoured by undulating tracks, and now back on a flat track, for example. There's loads of little factors that go into it, as well as a speed figure or a time figure. I don't like backing horses that have run poor time figures next time, even if they were unlucky. If the overall time of the race was poor, then I'm not kind of interested. I will compare those throughout the day when I go through it. And essentially, you're sort of looking for a reason why a horse will improve or won't improve. So, for example, he was drawn in stall 1 at Royal Ascot over 5 furlongs. A lot of people know that that's a disadvantage, but that's actually not being reflected in the market a lot of the times. If a horse has been denied a clear run, the bookmakers are going to pick that up, and that will be incorporated into their prices. The draw is not as such, and they don't pick up things like a horse trying to come from off the pace at Chester, or other little mitigating factors like that. Or there's undulating tracks is quite a big one at the moment. A lot of horses, especially Newmarket, they don't handle it. They don't handle the dip, especially youngsters, 2-year-olds. As soon as they get back on a flat track, a completely different performance. So it's about just taking into all those sort of things and upgrading and downgrading performances for me.
Okay, so it's an accumulation of knowledge and experience. And do you keep notes on horses? Do you have a database, or is it something you keep in your own head? How does it work from that perspective?
I subscribe to the Racing Post, but there's a note section on there, and I'll normally make my notes on there. I will make notes on horses constantly. If I'm seriously interested in a horse, then that will go into a tracker. Now, that's not to back blind, but that's just to let me know you've made this note and he's in the tracker. It must be well worth a second look today.
Oh, that makes sense. I was just curious how that worked. And I suppose the next question is your bets and how it all works from that perspective. I presume, are you betting at any particular time of day, or do you take your bets before you put them up on the column, I presume?
Well, only sometimes we know how to do that through multiple aliases, if you like. It's not something I recommend, but people help me out and put some bets on and stuff for me if I want to get on sort of the day before. But normally I have to wait until the next day or wait until the morning. I've only got a couple of accounts in my name, and they're hardly thriving, in all honesty, in terms of they're restricted.
Well, it's quite the reality of betting, isn't it? Especially when you're good at it and you make a profit. As all my guests that I will all talk about this, and there's no problems with having a network of people to get on.
Yeah, it's very difficult to even just to go on and just have to have a decent bet. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. It's all right having 5s and 10s and stuff, but even if you want to have 100 quid on horse, it's really difficult.
Of course. So from your perspective, that requires having a little bit of a network, having trying to think of a solution to the problem and reaching out to other people. But what about for people following your tips and how they deal with that particular problem? It must be a dilemma for you if you're putting up bets and people might be struggling to get them on.
Yeah, it is a dilemma for me, and it does sort of play on me a little bit. But at the end of the day, and this is going to sound harsh, but the responsibility has to leave my hands at some point. So I can do a good write-up for you, and you can decide whether you go and put that bet on. You can decide if you've got to build a network to put bets on. You can decide whether you wait till the morning, or you can decide if you don't want to back it at all. So I have to say that it's out of my hands. Otherwise, the next step is essentially coming around and putting the bet on for the person. Now, I want them to get on at the price, of course I do. I want them to win money. That's the whole reason I do this job. But it's very difficult when you're getting berated for a losing tip. You're getting berated for a poor price or a price that's disappeared. You're being constantly hounded over different aspects of the job, and you kind of have got to go this is my column, these are my selections. If you can get on, you can get on. If you can't and you have to wait, then you need to learn to decide where you should have your price barrier, for example. Or maybe I should start including price barriers. I do sometimes. Maybe that's a thing I could learn for going forward for the future. And this is a 12-1 shot. Don't back it any less than 8-1. But, essentially, I can't put the bet on for you.
Yeah.
So, the responsibility has to leave me at some point.
I think you say like a price barrier, like a minimum odds. I believe Hugh Taylor is probably one of the biggest movers of markets. I hear from people regularly saying, I was having that bet, but Hugh Taylor snaffled the price. I think you put a minimum price odds, and then all that happened is that bookmakers either slashed it to those or just under it. And then you were just happy to do that. So there is that issue. And I understand the frustration with people who complain about losing tips, but I think it's more of a industry issue, isn't it? Surely that people can't get bets on, and people are unable to losing interest in a sport like horse racing because the issue is so intrinsically wrapped up in horse racing. Betting and horse racing goes together, perhaps more so than other sports. And so if you can't bet on horse racing, where's the interest?
Yeah, I mean, we all know the bookmaker, or we all know the bookmaker that tries to price up a race 48 hours in advance, but we know their phantom prices, and you can't get them prices. They're just marking your card. There's tactics that I don't agree with. That's probably why I pick and choose who I work for. So, and I do that with the mind of a punter. So working with Betfair there were other options where I could have sort of gone and worked for alongside at the same time or before, and I chose not to. I chose Betfair. Like I said, I always wanted to work for them, but I do feel that they've got some sort of integrity with the way they do things. I think their odds compilers and their traders are very clever. I think they're probably some of the best in the business. And I'm not just saying this just because I work for them. I'm saying this because I think a lot of Betfair tipsters themselves should be respected because they have to use their odds, and they are probably playing against some of the better traders in the industry.
Yeah, that's a fair point. And obviously that's a decision that the thought process. Interesting to know about the thought process that goes into making sure you work for companies that align with what you would like, and perhaps
you're not going to see me working for William Hill and Coral and Labros and everyone else. I'm not going to work for everybody. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I kind of still have the mind of a punter, and I am a punter, so I have to work with where I feel that relates to the most.
Of course, people don't know that. That's really intriguing to hear about. People won't know the thought processes that you've had and the opportunities perhaps you've turned down or not taken up because for this particular reason. So it's really good to hear of that. And when it comes to price moving, is that something that you're mindful of? So if you're seeing a bet, obviously you only have to quote from what I understand on Betfair, but elsewhere, if, for example, Gigi, are you mindful of the fact that if I put this price up, it's with a bookmaker that is going to slash the odds or doesn't treat customers particularly well, and then you take a lower price? Is that something that factors into your tipping of a particular bet?
Yeah, absolutely. There's been a few times in the past where Gigi are very, very good, and they kind of allow me to sort of say, okay, look, we can't. They'll go away and do the prices and scan the prices, but if I come back and say, look, we can't put that up because that's that, or there's only one of them, or that's going to go within 2 minutes, or that's just gone, we need to redo the price. They're very, very good and flexible in doing that. So we are always looking at that sort of thing, like putting a 2-1 shot up, that's a general 13-8 shot. And then that 2-1 goes 2 minutes after the column's gone out, or 5 minutes after the column's gone out, then that gets adjusted. So we're always trying to do our best. As much as people can give you grief for it, we are always trying to do our best. And that goes for a lot of the tipsters in this industry, especially well-known tipsters. I've never met anybody that wants people to lose money. Mm-hmm. Never. And, sometimes that gets forgotten about when you put your head above the parapet and you're an easy target. But don't get me wrong, I don't want to say like it's all doom and gloom. I've got a fantastic job and a fantastic life, and I'm very, very lucky. I appreciate every moment of it. It's just sometimes I feel like instead of writing a tweet, you have to do a video. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah. Because it's very hard to sum up in however many characters a tweet might give you. You need to try and, because there's depth to these issues, aren't there? There's depth to them. You need to put them in context. You need to explain what happens. And I suppose people would probably wonder, working for the likes of Betfair, the right question, does it give you any account perks of getting on? I know it probably doesn't, but...
I wish.
No. So it's not like you're going to, okay, we'll give you a little bit more flexibility in your account now, Daryl. You have the same issues everyone else has.
Absolutely the same issues.
What about advice people, in terms of getting on? You would say go and talk to friends or beyond the exchanges, because sometimes there's not liquidity on the exchanges. Do you have any advice for people concerned about that? If they could listen to this going, well, I want to follow people like Daryl, or I want to follow horse racing tipsters. I'm concerned about getting my bets on.
It's very difficult there is no advice, and you hit the nail on the head really, saying that this is an industry-wide issue and something that needs to be sorted. Something that's probably only going to get worse when the white paper comes out. It's very, very difficult. I mean, it depends as well how much people are betting them. For example, myself, I bet £50 a point.
Yeah.
And I mean, that doesn't sound like a lot to a lot of people. And people say, you can't win money betting at that low or whatever. But for example, if you lay out 3 bets, 1 point each way, 1 point win, 1 point win, so £200 on a Monday gone. It only takes you 5 days to lay out £1,000. So it depends how much people are betting. And if they're betting in small stakes, then they should have no issue really, unless they're being targeted. You should not be being restricted if you're having £5 on horses.
And he's talked then about the white paper. And obviously there are other issues surrounding horse racing. We've seen terrible field sizes lately, lots of concern about the races and trainers and number of horses and that kind of thing. Are you concerned beyond just what we talked about so far, but for racing moving forward?
Yeah, absolutely. If the racing leaders don't start doing something about it, they're going to be reacting too late. So an interesting issue today was that the Cheltenham crowd has been reduced. Now we know why they're doing that, because they can add a 5th day. But there's loads of little issues that things like the whip and things like diversity is being banded around and is causing friction between people at the moment. And there's lots and lots of issues, even away from the betting side of it, which is madness. It needs a fixture reduction in both codes, national hunt racing and in flat racing. And that is the only way I can see the sport generating more money and building up the appetite for more fixtures. But there's so many different issues going on at the moment. I've never known a sport to have so many issues. It's unbelievable. It feels like it's the blind leading the blind at the head of affairs, and something's got to be done, because not just from a betting perspective where the government is basically trying to force us punters out, but in terms of the racetracks and the survival of racing, I'm worried.
So let's talk about what your plans for the future there, Daryl. Is it more of the same? Are you going to be writing? It doesn't sound like you've got many more spare hours in the day to do any more columns.
It's going to be more of the same for the foreseeable future, although you never know what opportunities are around the corner. But again, in terms of the betting side of things, I think it's just going to be a case of I'm basically just trying to build a foundation at the moment. So I'm trying to learn year on year. I mean, a lot of the people in this game, punters and tipsters, have got a good 15, 20 years on me. So I'm kind of like keep telling myself, if you know what you know now, imagine what you know in 10 years. And hopefully I can build a betting foundation, and then going forward we'll be comfortable enough to survive, know that we'll survive on our own with a betting type of thing. But in terms of the tipping, I just want to carry on doing what I'm doing. I love my job. So
yeah, it definitely comes across. And how can people find out more and read your columns? Do you want to fire out some links?
Yeah, you can go to gg.co.uk every day to read the tipping column, or betting.betfair.com. I'm all over there as well.
Yeah, and you're on social media as well. Do you want to share your...
Oh, yeah, social media. Yeah, follow me on Twitter, Daryl Carter 7, if you like what you heard today.
Well, definitely. Well, how about TikTok, Daryl? The full suite.
I don't know my TikTok.
No problems. And I think we've been exchanging emails and talking about doing some analysis work, reviewing your results. And I think we'll be looking to do that at the end of this year, once we've got a full year's worth of kind of figures. And yeah, your spreadsheet is, I think you work with another guy, is it Cheltenham, who helps you keep that?
Oh, yeah. The brains behind the operation, Cheltenham. He's very, very clever. He's got something coming out, actually, that's going to shock people, I think, about field sizes and national hunt racing. I think he said something like that the BHA have overcalculated how many horses are in training. by a considerable amount, and that's probably why we've got the amount of fixtures we've got. So that'll be interesting to read.
Oh, definitely. Well, I mean, I've seen his spreadsheet work, and that's exceptional. So it sounds like he's got a particular skill with numbers. So that'll be interesting to see. So thank you ever so much, Daryl. I encourage people to go and check out some of the links. Go follow you on social media. Thanks ever so much, Daryl, and I wish you well for the rest of the year.
Thanks very much, buddy.